Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I'm
So
so glad
welcome
that some
to,
of you came back. This is so exciting.
um, yeah. So welcome to our second session on the neurohumanities, and this particular session with Amos is on, I think, what I call neuro soundscapes, right? That's a working title right now. Um, I, I will, today is going to be more interactive, right? And so if you can, I would appreciate you could turn on your video so that we connect better. And because we are visual machines as well. So, if that's okay with you. And just as a recap from last session, right? So we have an interesting conversation with Amos. So it was clear that uh, creativity is a process, right? Um, how he works, is a process. I think we understand that. It can also be teamwork, um, and sometimes you have to push over your boundaries, right? Or communicate and translate your language to the language of other uh, team members, other disciplines, like the case for the neurohumanities, linking engineering and science with the humanities. Um, and I guess at the core of this conversation is, um, you know, how we can make visible the subconscious, right? These are um, the brain patterns that never reach the surface. And by surface, I mean the behavior that we see, that we hear, that we feel, right? These are things that are only possibilities, right? But they never reach out the light. And through the brain computer interface, we could reach out to these uh, um, thoughts, these patterns, subconscious activity, right, and then make them visible through sound, to the soundscapes. And Amos, has been uh, brainstorming about how to do this, right? And so this this is a brief summary of how I understood. So you might have some other idea, and feel free to to uh, come in the discussion, right? Yeah, with questions, with comments. This is being recorded. We will make it available to all of you, so that we can continue working after today, right? If everything goes fine, Amos and I are already talking about, maybe in the fall when everything is possible, we can meet and actually have developed performance, right? And I was thinking maybe we can bring some of our colleagues from dance and have them wear the BCI and the sound grammar that Amos has been designing and maybe even involve the music department as well. Anyway, so Amos, any initial thoughts before we enter the
Yeah, I mean, first of all, hey guys, good morning. Thank you for coming to hang out again. It's lovely to get to see everyone again. It sort of feels like we're doing stuff together, which is nice. Um, so you mentioned the BCI. You said make visible the subconscious. I decided to circle visible and write experience the subconscious to some extent, because I like to think of what I create, not to sound sort of cliche, but it is a bit of an experience. You're experiencing things in a way, and I like to try to create spaces for people to experience their own thoughts. This is what I used to say before any of this stuff. And now when I think about thought, it's like a whole new level of experiencing it. But Pepe and I have talked a little bit this morning about the subconscious as focusing on that. And just this morning, I'm now like, the more I talk about this and the more I write down and I listen and learn, the subconscious, I feel like is perhaps where our aim is. And to be able to, create these grammars of sound that then become a representation of our subconscious that we can experience in real time. I mean, I think that's in my mind where this is slowly, the fog, the thick fog of whatever this project is slowly like layers are gone away, they're moving away. And that idea of, oh, okay, so now you were moving towards, you're focusing in on the subconscious and bringing that as a real life experience, and it's still being a subconscious thought. Because what I'm starting to learn, I mean, and I guess, and a lot of you guys know much more about this realm than I do, but if a thought is living in our subconscious and then we do understand it, has it left our subconscious? And these are questions I'm sort of asking to the group, so please, I'm here to learn too. If it's left our subconscious and it's an actual thought, and then the BCI reads that, is that a different thing than if it just reads where the subconscious thought is? So that's fine. I like it. That's kind of where my thoughts are with it right now.
Yeah, and I have some thoughts on that. Again, I welcome everyone. So just let me start with an example, right? Just a simple movement of your finger, right? If you place sensor on the brain, and you start recording, and then at some point you move your finger, right? We can record the initial activity related to that impeding movement up to 2 seconds prior to the onset of the movement. 2 seconds. No, so that means that your brain already knows what it's going to do even before you are aware, consciously aware about that impeding movement. It becomes conscious to you, in tens of milliseconds, prior to the movement, right? Because the signal travels from the brain to the spinal cord to the muscles, right? And so that takes 60 to 100 milliseconds, right? So now this is one finger, but you had to make that choice. You had to select that, in fact, the next behavior that you want to generate is moving the finger. Right. And before that happens, there's a multitude of things, possible action that you could perform, right? And one of them has to win the competition, or maybe 2 or 3. We are multitasking most of the time, but it's a limited number of things you can do. You can sing, you can move your hand, your body, you can, recall a memory. There are a finite number of things you can do at the same time. But that means that all these world of possibilities never reach the surface, right? They are never created for others to experience, right? And so, by using a BCI, we have a unique opportunity to dig in, right, into this repertoire, this world of potential actions that never saw the light, unless we use the BCI to make that happen. And so, in a way, we are interfering with the process, in a good way, I think.
Yeah. Have you guys seen that show called Devs? Has anybody watched Devs? Like, this is just Devs. Like, this is all the, like, what we're this sort of in between space of there's a thought and then the action. So like, here's the thought, here's the action. My face is the in between. In the show called Devs, there's this thing they've created where they're able to see into the future for a few seconds, and so they hear what they're about to say right before they say it.
The spoiler, by the way, but
Well, it's, I mean, to some extent. I mean, there's just this. There's one moment. There's one moment in the show I'm thinking of where this kind of happens. But what Pepe's saying, and I'd actually watched the show after Pepe and I's initial conversation, and was just really like, oh wow, this is the timing of this is cool. But yeah, do you guys refer to any of this as latency? Is that ever a term you guys use?
Yeah, we use it all the time.
Well, music, I'm sure that I just was curious. I'm trying to learn the grammar, the actual grammar as well. But with music, with a lot of the music processing I do, it has to go from all through the computer and through the interfaces, like the musical interfaces, and latency is a big no-no. Like, I need to hit the button and I need to hear it, or I need to play the chord and I need to hear it. If there's any latency, it really messes things up. It creates this very undesirable delay. Right. But within our thoughts here, and this kind of latency space that we're talking about with the subconscious is really cool. Okay, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah. I do have a question. Amos talked about that if you have a thought that thought would have already happened in the brain 2 seconds before. And so when I think about thought and music and how Amos has described his I'll call it pieces of the music, is it is it possible that we don't have full thoughts to 2 seconds and 4 minus 2 seconds, minus 4 seconds, minus 6 seconds? Is it possible that it's just the analogous of pixels? They're just pieces. And that by the time they become thoughts, by the time I can articulate my thought, it's in the process, it's in that latency that those pixels have become the picture that comes out. Is that possible?
Well, I mean, I think I think that space that we're sort of focusing in on right now, and that where that, 2 seconds and then the thought happens, that's where I'm sort of curious now about tapping into. But Pepe, you can probably speak to this better.
Yeah. I mean, so, thoughts have different durations and they come with different latencies, right? So, but I think, until they generate experience, right? On you, on somebody else, they're still thoughts, right? And so I think the difference is, so we're a streaming machine, right? So I'm developing, what I'm going to say next, and trying to connect the dots among the questions, and no, this is evolving and very dynamic. So I'm reshaping these thoughts, right, as I speak. But yeah, I think that there are some basic units. If you talk about pixels, being maybe the most basic unit as we form images, right? At least digitally, right? Same with with sound. What are the basic units? We have basic units for writing, and so and this is one of the main challenges in neuroscience. What is the basic unit of processing in the brain, be in the visual domain, on the auditory domain, and tactile domain, and so on. So and this kind of conversation, it addresses that as well, directly or indirectly. So that's very important. And now, do we put this? So the one question is, how does the brain put together these basic units to create more complex, images or more complex sounds, or and I guess that's something that I think Amos is perhaps trying to reverse engineer, right? You're building this, this grammar of sounds, and you have already some rules, some basic rules based on your experience, right?
Yeah.
Based on your knowledge, that so in a way you are reversing engineering the brain. You are making use of brain mechanisms, right? How we perceive sound, and what things we like and what things people don't like, your experience, right?
Right. I think in a way I have to kind of ride this initial version of this. And I think this comes down to a lot from the film scoring that I've done, because when I'm scoring film, at the end of the day, I'm taking moments in time in the film and I'm manipulating your emotions as the viewer. And so I do kind of, one of my worries with this / just decisions is with these sounds that I create, how much manipulation is going on because of what they actually sound like. Because right now my focus is on creating an interesting palette of sounds, and right now it's a very calm, ambient, more meditative one. But at the end of the day, I could make one that's terrifying if I wanted to. I could make a whole grammar of sounds that would scare you to death. But that's not what I want to do. I mean, that's like a whole different kind of it's almost like the haunted house version. And so then you sort of get into, as these things are being created, and this is only my interpretation of them, like I think they sound ambient, and I think that they sound meditative and sort of peaceful. Other people might not like that at all. They might not think that. So that's kind of the interesting thing here. We're trying to dive into the subconscious by representing it with sounds, and then how we get back and perceive those sounds, and how I sort of have this. It's sort of a terrifying position in it, where I'm saying, here's what I'm giving you to represent your subconscious. That sort of almost seems like it's not okay, but that's sort of the project, and that's what we're experimenting with. So I've gotten over that fact.
Pepe, isn't that exactly what we talked about in our last Nawal session? The
Right,
fact
right, yeah.
we talked exactly about this, Amos. The idea that if we're trying to sonify my brain of an artist, that and I wrote to Amos on by Instagram, and I told him how some music would lead to a brown or a black painting.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's the same thing. We talked about the fact that some, some beautiful water sound was what I needed at Zen moments when I'm looking at the painting and deciding where I'm going next. But to go next, that drive, I needed some heavy duty Dua Lipa. And so, but I'm telling them what I react to, how every day I make choices and I'm drawing from those choices, what drives my spirit to then big action into the painting.
Yeah.
Whereas, so we're talking exactly the same thing. You're playing God.
I didn't want to say that, but
Yeah,
yes,
but
like, because I think that's really not, I don't like, but at the end of the day, yes, I am. I'm saying, at the moment it's like 55 sounds that represents everyone's subconscious. Like that's not fair. That's not, but you have to get over that at this point. And, right now I'm focused more, I've created this current set of sounds because we have to have something.
Yeah.
We're not going to land. We can't say, oh, we're going to figure out the universal sounds that it is. That's impossible. And I'm just trying to understand the architecture and the blueprint for this. So we could then make infinite grammars of sounds. I could make 25 different kinds of grammars of sounds. I could have my friends, they could make a grammar of sound. I'm working right now on the infrastructure. How do we implement the idea? And then, at Halloween, we could make a haunted house grammar of sound. Like you can do at the end of the day, it's the blueprint / architecture that I'm trying to clear the fog with. And you have to have heat. You can't build a table you've got to have wood. Whether this is a total mock-up at this point. I mean, this is like a little bitty, what is the board, the foam board model right now, and we need
we're coming with the recipe.
Right,
we're trying to come with a recipe.
Right.
No,
I mean, that will. So yeah,
just to follow on that thought, so Harina, maybe at some point you need Dua Lipa to get you to the right state. But what if you already had that Dua Lipa in your brain, but it hasn't reached the surface, right? What if your own brain can trigger you to a different state to continue your creative process, right? So this also in my mind leads to those states where you have a block. A writer can have a block and then it cannot get the next word, right? Or an artist or a musician, right? So what if we can open the gate, right, by using your own activity that has problems getting to the surface, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so the same way you can use an external stimulus, you can use your own brain activity, which would be great because then you have more control on that. Anyway, one comment here, I'd like to engage some other people here. Alex Craig, he is very interested in the speech decoding. So decoding or synthesizing the speech from brain activity. And this is not far away from what we are talking here, because we know that speech sounds have some basic units, right? At some point, phonemes, right? We have consonants, we have vowels and all that. And the brain processes this. I mean, this is the most complicated thing that we do, which is to talk, right? I mean, can you imagine the amount of information we're generating every millisecond, right? And how we put things together. I mean, this is the most complex behavior, it's talking, right? In my mind, all the different muscles that we have in the mouth, and we talk with our body too, right? So I don't know, you have any thoughts, Alex, in terms of going either units or linking these units or transitioning. Amos was talking about this rest state. These are very important in speech when you are synthesizing a speech, right? The brain likes to fill in, to interpolate, to complete sentences or words or sounds whenever there is some background activity. So if there's some noise, you can fill in, you can complete. But if there is quiet, if there's silence, the brain cannot do anything with it, Right. I know you have any comments, Alex, on this?
Yeah, well, I've been thinking of some ways where we could either train or just use a model that we create ourselves for this kind of thing. I did want to bring up one point. I think Geraldina mentioned, she thought of high level representations and whether or not, we go through steps of processing. And that's exactly right. I mean, if you see a bird, you say, well, this is a bird, but that's a very high level representation. Your brain first sees, okay, well, that curvature looks like a beak. I see feathers and it's flying and I'm hearing chirps. And then that processing leads to the high level representation of, well, this is a bird. So I thought that was, an important point she made. But I have thought of ideas how to make this audio interface. But anyway, I've got some ideas for that. I mean,
great.
I think we can, get features like connectivity between different regions that we specify as certain emotions or something, and we could and then move forward with that.
So I guess one question that comes from that is, so Amos is generating this grammar of sound. So are we expecting these units, these grammars, to form connections with other things in the brain, right? With memories or with sensations or with current ongoing stimulus that because our brain likes to associate and it likes to put things together. So when you see an apple, you hear an apple, you smell an apple, you feel an apple, right? So this is the representation. It's why we can recognize people the way they move, the way they talk, even the way they write, right? I mean, we like to create representations. And when we have these basic units from different domains, we put them together and then we form this whole. And I think this grammar of sound will do that. It will like to connect to other things because they're gonna be cueing things, right? They're gonna be triggering things, right? So remember, we want to bring this unconscious to the surface so that people can experience that, including yourself. And we plan to do it through these soundscapes, right? So that's so just a thought in terms of this is more than the unit.
Are we sure we want to randomize like the specific links to sounds? I'm worried that if we don't keep that constant scale, it'll be harder for like the user to learn different regions of sounds. But anyway, I've got some ideas on that too.
Right. There are some studies on the physiological time scale, right? Certainly for speech, but things don't happen. So there's some level of randomness, but there are some basic patterns within that randomness, right? Yeah. So there's this comes of white noise. Everything is really, this is more like pink noise. So this is more like some noise with a structure. So maybe this randomness needs to be bounded by some parameters to keep things connected. Yeah. But I guess this is part of the exploration.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I would mention when it Alex, thank you for your thoughts too, and thinking about this and moving these ideas forward a little bit. But what I have here in this current grammar is different lengths of sound. I'm not trying to tie the short 1 second sounds to a 1 second thought. That's not my idea at all. Or the longer sounds only happen when a longer thought evolves. I'm strictly just trying to create different pieces of audio to make a piece happen. And so we have those different lengths. If we just had short sounds, it would be pretty boring. If we just had long sounds, it would be pretty boring. So I'm trying to just create a larger randomized mix of that. Where I kind of hit the wall of understanding is how how subconscious thought one is tied to these sounds. I don't have an exact idea yet of how they're directly tied to the thoughts, if that makes sense. I don't want the lengths of this current grammar of sound. I don't want the links of those to confuse anybody, that those are supposed to be tied to certain thought links. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does.
Okay. Yeah. And that's really important. Like, I'm not at all after that. I'm not. And so therefore it does come down to how in the design of this, How do we allocate sound to thought? But I'm not trying to do it with lengths. That's not the idea right now.
I have a quick question. Just to clarify, what sounds like what do you mean by what sounds you're trying to make? Like like piano sounds, like chord?
Right. I guess maybe we should share. Should I share my screen and let people kind of hear?
Yeah, I think that's a good time.
Okay. And also too. Okay. So let me do that. Okay. Can everybody hear this and see this?
Yeah.
Okay. So just so I can explain this real quick. So what I have right here, this is the program I work in. It's called Logic. And I have this, this is an ESX sampler. When I open up the sampler, all of these here, these are all of the individual audio files that right now make up the grammar of sound. So an attempt to, and they're all, I mean, they all really, let's see. So when this moves around this line, you can tell like that's the sound that's playing. So, and again, you guys can hear this, okay, I trust. Mm-hmm. Okay. So this has right now I have randomized these quite a lot. Let me do this. Okay, so there's a set of medium sounds, medium in duration, long sounds, long in duration, and then short sounds that happen quickly. So, you know, the example of a short sound would be, this would be a short sound, something that happens quickly. That's another short sound. This is a medium sound, so it's going to happen for about 3 seconds or so, give or take. And you know, this again, guys, this is all I'm making all this up at this point. Where's a long sound? There's a long sound. So when this sound is triggered, it plays out for about 6 to 10 seconds, I think. So, and what I've done here, I've taken all these, and you can see, hopefully see these little blocks down here. I've randomly mapped them out. So if I'm to play this, okay, I'm going to just randomly play this. And the idea is each time a sound is triggered, that would have been a thought that is read and triggers the sound. So, you know, if I'm just randomly thinking, and this is hard, guys, because the problem here is I'm physically making this happen. I'm deciding to push this down or push this down. So when I hear that, I'm influenced by it. I'm probably going to hit it again. Where I run into being able to truly test this stuff is making it as random as possible. Because I'm trying to take my human element out of it. Therefore, it would represent the idea that, you know, this is happening, this is being triggered. Again, I see this as these sounds have been mapped to this keyboard. I then play the keyboard, which triggers the sound. And there's a bunch, I have more short sounds in here than I'd probably like. I'd probably like more long sounds, but again, this is just the initial idea. So these are the sounds I'm working with right now. But again, these are like, you know, foam board. Like this is just the initial, these are the initial pieces in order to work on the infrastructure and to work on the blueprint and the architecture of this idea.
One question, Amos.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you, as you said, you know, you have full control of, you know, which pieces to play, but right. You also have control right now of the rest, right? You decide.
Well, see, okay, so I mean, the rests are. Hang on just a second. Yeah, this is a bit odd because long, short, long. I tell you, the rests do not seem to be in here right now for some reason. But what the rests would do, that's very strange. It's odd. Okay, sorry. What the rests would do is the rests are durations in 1 second, 2 second, 3 second, 4 second, 5 seconds. So if I hit one of the keys and it makes the rest happen, then a rest, a thought, or a key triggers that rest, which just helps build space within the piece and just makes it so it's not, because honestly, right now, this kind of sounds more like the kid banging on the piano, right? This is constantly, things are constantly happening. again, I'm not sure why the rests are not injected into here. This is strange. If the rests are in here, it helps break up the sort of large chaoticness of sound. And that's why the rests become an important factor within it. So it doesn't just sound like someone's just banging, not even banging, but someone's constantly like, a thought is making sound. That we don't want that. We need it to have space in order to keep it, I think, in order to keep it interesting.
Amos?
So that's where the rests do come into play. Yes.
My question has to do with a comment you made that is very interesting to me. You said you wanted to take away the humanness out of this and make it as randomized as possible. And yet, when we're talking about attaching this to a human brain in action, now you're really bringing human,
right. No, I completely agree with you. What I mean in the test phases of this are for me to hear, like on a composer level, because I have to every once in a while just go, okay, cool. I'm composing the music, I'm composing this grammar of sound. In order to make decisions on the sounds I want in here, I need to hear it in the most randomized way possible.
Okay, got it.
Does that make sense? Because if we look here, right now I could hit play on this, and I've put all of these here, right? Amos has physically moved this here. Amos has physically moved this here. So I'm making all these decisions. I'm putting all this space in. I don't want. That's a bad representation. That means Amos as a human has made all of those decisions, physical decisions. Or if I'm playing it on the keyboard, I am physically deciding to play that. I tell you guys what turned out to be my favorite test on this was actually when I turned the sound off and played the keyboard, because I wasn't being influenced by the sound coming back to me. I was strictly just playing at random. Then when I listened back, I went, oh, okay, this is the close. I was not being influenced as much by the actual sound. I was only being influenced by my decision to push down the keys. Now, if our subconscious,
so we call that we call that the open loop, right? So that's a great way to characterize your response without being affected.
So what I'm explaining right there is considered open loop.
Open loop, right?
Okay.
Wait, why isn't that the closed loop?
The closed loop is when you hear to it, because that modifies your.
Right. Yeah, he was talking about the open loop because he
open loop, right?
Yes.
Which is
okay. So when I
characterize your brain response, right?
When I wasn't hearing it, it was an open loop, and when I was hearing it, it's a closed loop. Okay, this is really good. Let me write this down. Sorry.
Yeah. It would be great. You could play some of those examples that you like. I don't know if you have them available. Yeah.
Right. Let's see. Let me close these down here. Okay. So this was sound test 1, and I won't play this whole thing because again, this does get to a point where it, you go, cool, I've heard it. But sound test 1 is where Amos was moving stuff around on the screen. I wasn't playing anything in real time. I was deciding where it went. So that had this kind of sound. So again, all of these, how we're hearing them, I decided where they went. I chose that sound to happen there on the screen. At the beginning of it, you sort of heard a chord. Like I built that chord out of the individual sounds. So I'll just scrub through it a bit more. And again, I could see all the durations. I could see the shorts. I could see the longs and how they were flowing together when I put this together. So this is more like how I compose that one almost more like I would for film or for actual music. Now, sound test B, this is the one where I turned off the sound. So let's see, just so I can reiterate this. The one I just played, that would be a closed loop. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Hold on just a second. Okay, now, so sound test B is where I had it mapped out on the keyboard and I turned off the sound and randomly played it. And this one to me felt much more organic, I think, because I wasn't being influenced by what I hear. I'm also, I mean, I'm constantly playing piano, so I'm always, everything I hear, I'm influenced by. Like, I have to sleep at night with earplugs because if I hear anything, I'm gonna react to it, and I start thinking. And this version where I couldn't hear the sounds, I felt like was a closer, and this is just my idea. This is it's a closer representation of what I think it would be like if our thoughts were making this happen.
So
And
let
again,
me ask you a
I'm just
question
experiment.
here.
These are total experiments. I have no idea.
Yeah. No, this is very interesting. I mean, this open versus closed loop performance. But so when you remove the sensory modality of interest here, right? The sound, the auditory system, you remove it out. You still are using the rest of your brain. You know, how you train your fingers, right? You know, what type of movements. You have some idea about what this grammar sounds, you know, the repertoire you have built. Right. So you have some information, right? And you use that, but you devoid that from the actual feedback. So you cannot have, so you are basically exploring in a way your creative brain, right? Without being contaminated by the present, right? So this is still a structure, right? But it's not the structure on the same modality as the sound that you are generating, right?
You know, you mentioned the word being contaminated by. I mean, that seems negative, but I think in the context of what I'm trying to get to, that's a great way to put it. I am contaminated by it because I hear it and I immediately, well, especially if I push the key down, I know it's like, oh, that key makes that sound. Well, I want to hear it again. I want to hear it again. I want to hear it again, or I don't want to hear it again. One of the two. So therefore, I'm putting the human element into it, and it cannot be as random as if our subconscious were triggering it. And so I've mentioned too, and I'm not to a point I can even share this yet because I'm learning it. But there's a program I'm trying to build a more random playback to where I can put the grammar of sound into it. I hit go, and it will infinitely play these things in random time durations. There's a few parameters I'm looking for, but you know, at this point, so those are sort of our three tests. The way I can test it in those three ways. The second way seems the most, well, I guess it's 4 because I can turn off the sound again. But it's an idea because I'm trying to understand if our subconscious is triggering these. We do not have control over our subconscious that I understand.
But so, yeah, by definition.
By definition, if I have control over how these sounds are coming to me, it's not as represented. I'm not getting the most honest representation of the concept, because at this point I'm still just in concept mode. Like the concept of this, I still can't 100% hear it. I had my mom sit down and play on the piano. I had her play on it, and I recorded it, and I listened back to it. But again, she was playing more patterns. She wasn't really even listening. She was more just playing patterns on the keyboard. So, you know, it's a tricky thing to try from a composer point of view. It's a tricky thing to experience. And again, I want to put together something that, you know, these grammars of sound, I want them to be interesting. I want them to be something you want to continue to listen to and live within. And in order to do that, I need to hear it. And so that's where I've been working a lot right now, is finding the best representation of the concept. That's, I would say, I'm at representation of concept phase.
Right. So a follow-up question would be: now you have explored this open versus closed loop, which I think is great, and I think it's worth doing more of that. Just to look at the spectrum of things that you can find, you know, yourself, right? But the other question is, what would be the next step, right? So I think we need to start talking about going from your fingertips in open loop, right, to your brain waves, right?
Right.
And the question is, which is similar to, you know, how do you create randomness, you know, in the selection of these things, right? So you're doing that, sort of doing that by doing the open loop, right? But another way would be to look at, for example, the characteristics of the features of different brain areas in your brain, and use them to drive the grammar sound.
Absolutely. So, and that's where I'm brand new to. You know, I've tried to understand it from my chair as much as I can, and now I'm past my chair. So
I want to mention a couple of possibilities just for information, maybe to bring some window opportunity, right? And everybody again is welcome to comment, because you all have done, some of you have done, brain recordings and things like that. So some general things about brain activity, brain waves, right? So what we measure is the electroencephalogram, or EEG, right? So we measure brain waves, right? And these brain waves start from no wave at all, which means aligned, right? So there's nothing changing, it's just some level of activity, to high, oscillatory activity around 150 hertz, which is very low compared to what we can hear. We can hear, in the 20 kilohertz or more, right? Or you can produce music, in a more larger bandwidth. But in terms of the brain activity, is limited between 0 hertz, or 0 oscillations per second, to about 150 at the highest level, right? So the space for oscillations in the brain is quite reduced, right? Quite limited. Now, another important part is that you look at all these frequencies, the contribution of all these frequencies between 0 and 150 hertz is not flat. Our brain prefers lower frequencies, lower number of oscillatory oscillations per second, right? So in fact, it follows, we call it 1/f. It's a power law, more power, more sound waves, in the lower frequencies, and less so in the higher frequencies. So, and this varies a bit from area to area, right? So you could use this 1/f as a distribution, right? And then the lower frequencies, right, could have a higher probability of being played, right? While the higher frequency will have less so, right? So this is some information we can capture from your brain activity to sort of select, right? Yeah. Another possibility is that areas close together, and thoughts, they are more focal, they are more they're close together, and they tend to have higher frequencies, while more complex thought, more complex activity tends to engage more areas of the brain and prefer lower frequencies, right? So it depending on, so we might find that and some of this at this point is hypothetical, right? But we might find that the beginning of a thought starts in a very restricted area of the brain, higher frequency, and as it evolves and start recruiting other parts of the brain, so recruiting the visual representation, recruiting the auditory representation, recruiting some past memories, right? This starts to grow up, and then you see more power. You see a different type of pattern, right? So these are some ideas about how we could map your brain waves to this grammar of sound. And I have some other ideas, but I want to listen to some of the people here in case you have some other ideas. And actually that's a good time. I'd like to introduce one of my prior students, is Eric Todd. Eric, hi. Eric is an artist and also an engineer. He did his research with me, and one of the things he did, and I'm gonna let him maybe show a little bit of that, is a kinetic sculpture that can use brain waves to control color, sound, and movement. And this is just an example of how we could use brain activity to drive alive this sculpture. So Eddie, would you like to comment briefly on that and maybe play a video, or I can play for you?
Sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Is it clear? I could put headphones in, but
it's fine.
Okay, great.
You sound fine. You sound good.
Awesome. So hi everybody. Good to see some of you. I know some of you. I don't know others of you. But yeah, I was a student of Pepe's in the lab for a few years. I graduated in May. of last year. But so one of the things I got to do was to build a sculpture in the lab, an installation that uses EEG in real time to drive, what Pepe said, movement, light, and sound. So since we're talking about sound, I can try to focus on that element a little bit more. I am also a musician, although not classically trained. So I don't think in terms of scales as much as other people do, but
I'm not classically trained either. It's okay.
Okay, great, awesome.
Yeah, no, I can't even really read music, so you're good.
All right, sorry, I got a new dog. He's very excitable. So what we did for the sculpture, and we'll play the video in a second, is we took the EEG signal, and Pepe mentioned this. So a lot of what we look at is sub 50 hertz actually, in terms of the EEG signal. And Amos, you probably do know this, and Pepe, maybe I should clarify that we can actually hear sound up to 20 to 40 hertz. So it's usually, but obviously an EEG signal is not, it's not audible, right, in terms of volume. But what I chose to focus on one main spectrum for this work, and that's the 8 to 12 hertz. So it's the alpha frequency band, which is sort of serves as kind of based on the research a sort of idle signal. It's kind of present in pretty much all areas of the brain. So and a lot of times what we'll note is that a dip in alpha power will indicate or can possibly correlate with an activation of a particular area of the brain. So what we did was we took a real-time EEG cat and filtered all the frequencies out except for that 8 to 12 hertz range. And then and we did this over a 4-second window. So you imagine we're taking the power of that frequency and averaging it, all the samples in that time period over a 4-second window. And then we also I also took an average of 4-second windows of some other frequency bands that were significant. So 4 to 8 hertz, also a 12 to 20. And a few other bands, and then we looked at the relative alpha power. So basically took that alpha power and then divided it by the total power under 50 hertz. So that way we could kind of see what percentage of our EEG signal in a particular moment is alpha frequency. And sort of I use that as the main driver of the installation. So how we did this with sound was I started with an A chord. So, and then different regions of the brain, we took that alpha power and then again, averaged the channels that were in that region. So we would take between 2 and sometimes like 6 or 8 of these the electrodes in a particular region and looked at that alpha power and then again, averaged that and then use that as to drive the pitch of basically it's kind of like imagine holding down an A chord, and then the pitch of each of those notes was driven by this alpha power in a region of the brain based on those electrodes. So what you'll hear is it kind of move in and out of like a sort of discordant sound and something that's kind of harmonic. And what you'll see actually in the video is Akshay. And a big thing here is that, so you'll hear when you hear it discordant, that's a big marker of, again, of some activity in a region, but Akshay in particular, when he meditates, and he has a meditative practice, and when he meditates, like you can really hear the alpha power synchronize in all these different regions, and you can hear this move toward harmony. And also, those same signals are driving the light and the motor movement of the sculpture. It's a motorized sculpture. So
I have two
Yeah.
questions. Can I ask two questions real quick?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, all of that was lovely. I wrote down like a whole note card of stuff. So I'm curious, why did you pick 4 seconds as your readable time?
So there's a couple of things there. Number one is Nyquist rate, which is just you need to have like, this is in a digital signal processing thing. There needs to be, when you, and guys, correct me if I'm wrong, when you window a signal, it needs to be what is it? It's double the frequency, I think, or something like that. Actually, I see you unmuting.
Yeah, so I guess one of the reasons why maybe you selected it is because you're looking at theta and delta lower frequencies. To get a good estimate of a power in a band, you need at least 3 to 4 oscillations. So
Right.
if you have 4 seconds, you'll have like 4 oscillations in like delta band and stuff, which could be why you might have used it. Yeah.
We originally had it set to 1 second, which is about what you need in terms of what Akshay was saying. Like I think that would get us, well, that would get us about 10 oscillations for alpha, right? I think we moved it to 4 because, and another thing that was happening was that some of these are aesthetic choices too, in terms of how the sculpture responds and having it respond a little bit. I think once we started working with it to kind of have it respond a little slower, so that way the changes weren't just kind of wild,
right?
You know.
Also, in the recordings, they usually have noise, right? And so when you average over a longer period of time, you tend to average out the noise, and so it becomes more clean, the signal. But this is related only to how you process the brain signal. Nothing relate to the time scale on the other side, right? So
right.
It will not constrain the grammar sound at all, right?
Exactly. No, because so the 4 seconds is a window of that we're looking at the signal in, and we're averaging over that window, but that window moves 1 sample at a time. So we're actually and we're sending real-time data 1 sample at a time, which I gotta remember the sample rate, but I think it would have been based on the cap and the software with the EEG cap. But,
so it's a sliding window basically. So it's moving over time, but it has some range in terms of integrating information in that range to clean up the signal and so to get some momentum too. By changing from sample to sample.
Right.
So maybe we can play a little video.
Yeah, we can play it now. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to stop that.
So I have, if you guys, I have it up. I think. Let me know if.
Don't forget to click the sound, but click the sound box at the bottom left of the.
Okay, share sound. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if you guys are seeing it. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Great. So here we'll start the video. It's pretty short, so but you can kind of see. Oh shoot! Are you seeing you guys yourselves here? Can I minimize that here? Let me minimize that. Okay. mean, yeah. So I have the code, and we could go into that too if you guys want. But
right.
yeah,
So this is just a representation, right? And again, Shay has been practicing meditation for a long time, so he's able to get good control of the installation. But many people have tried it, and the installation creates different experiences for some people, and some are very, very abrupt, very drastic in a way, and some that are less so. But this is a way to visualize this meditative state that Shay can get into, and that has been very well studied on these alpha waves. And yeah, so this is an example of things that we could do, right? So the headset you saw on Akshay is an example of one of the headsets that we have available that we could use for this. Has what, 20 channels at Eric, Akshay? How many channels?
20 channels, yeah.
22 channels. So 22 different parts of the brain. And also it has an accelerometer, so it can measure head movement, and other things.
Eric, let me ask a question if I can. Let me try to think about exactly how to ask it. So how is in that, first of all, it was really rad. Like, it was really cool. I like it a lot. Especially the colors. I like the colors that were chosen, and we can talk about that another time. Let's try to stay focused on sound, just because it makes the most sense to me at this point. Like the obviously you can hear the pitch changing. Right. And you mentioned holding down, you started with an A chord.
Yeah.
So you have A, C sharp, and E. Note wise.
I think there's also I think there's 4 notes in it. So it's not just a strict like third and fifth. I think there's like
that's okay. Like, just in general though. So you have those landing point notes, I guess, or those starting point notes. So, and then from there, they can obviously sound wise just oscillate in between. I mean, like a theremin or an on mono, the way it would move up and down. I mean, how is that? I mean, I guess in a way, just how did you accomplish that? Because obviously it's all moving in real time, right? Like those, like what was none of that is, I guess where I'm coming from is a stance of creating this grammar of sound that is predetermined, pre-recorded.
Right.
With your installation, everything is moving obviously in real time. And so therefore it has to oscillate in between everything. And we get that, that up and down the whole spectrum. I'm like, what was making that happen? How was that sound? Where did it come from as far as in the program?
So
does this make sense? Does this question make sense? I'm just curious, like how the basis of the sound, like.
So the whole installation is made using Touch Designer.
Okay. Right.
And I chose Touch Designer because it interfaces with like Python, and it was an easy way to control the LEDs.
Interesting. Yeah, I've read a lot about Touch Designer, so yeah. I'm actually really glad to be in a conversation about it, because from a distance it seems great.
Now I want to know, it's not the best tool for audio, I don't think.
It seems more visual. Like everything I see, all the cool stuff going on everywhere else in the world that's using Touch Designer, it's very heavy visual. So yes, I know that.
So I think that was a part of that decision a little bit, was that I mean, I could use Max or something, or Ableton, or sort of brought in I don't know, some other ways to do it, but Touch Designer does have some audio. So those are just oscillators.
Gotcha.
They're just audio oscillator operators
within Touch Designer. And see, there's a disconnect for me, because I just don't know Touch Designer. It's not a total disconnect, but like I'm still, I'm trying to break out.
To Max.
Right, which Max is new to me too, man. Like, this is a cool project because I have never sat down and gone, oh, I need a computer program to understand something, and it's not there. So that the part of this for me is really, you know what I mean? It's like, oh wow, I'm finally to that point where I've come up with an idea where I need to build a computer program. And up to this point, I've been able to accomplish it by recording my cello player and manipulating his sounds, and then we, do it whatever. So, like for the color field piece, for instance, it's up at Houston right now. I mean, that's all. It's just an ambient. At the end of the day, I don't want to like put it in a small meaningless box, but it's just an ambient piece of music. And I love it. It's great, and it's helped me work on a lot of different ideas. But at the end of the day, I put that together the same way I would put together a film score, or the same way I would put together a song in Logic. So I'm curious. That's why when I had Logic pulled up earlier and I talked about that and I talked about mapping it out on a keyboard, those are things that like that's where I'm familiar. Then I realized, oh cool, a program like Max, I can build something to where it will play this back to me randomly. Touch Designer. So like there's just I have an infinite amount to learn, which is really exciting because I haven't had a project where the where I feel like I know so much less than where I want to be. Like my mind is 100 steps ahead of what I actually know right now with this.
Well, and I think that is a tricky part about creating something that is generative in general, right? Like especially from a musical standpoint, because I feel like writing music is such a and Geraldina can probably speak to this too, like painting and a lot of times when you have something that it has a fixed output, you know, like your level of control and sort of decision making is really like you're really like you make careful decisions, right? Like if you're building a film score or something, like you're really you're making these careful choices, and it's a little. I would argue from a standpoint of that's how I usually make music. It is a little wild to kind of like let go of that a little bit, kind of let go of the rope. So, hey, well, I'm not going to have control over this anymore.
Right.
You know, I'm not gonna. It is gonna be what it is, and I think per your point, I think the key there is to try to put boundaries around it.
Exactly. There are parameters. I mean, I am, as much as I say I want to take the human aspect out of it in the test phase, even in the Max program I have in mind and I'm working on building, there are still parameters. I mean, there's still time duration and there's still number of samples that will play within that time duration. So I understand I'm giving it a little bit of parameters, but if we build something like this, it has to have something. It can't just, you know, what I'm wanting to do is make it as random as I can. Again, I'm still just, I mean, this is just in the test phase, like in something like Max. But Touch Designer, something like I've gotten really into Roji Akita, and just there's a whole realm of visual art. You know what I mean? Like you see Roji Akita stuff, and you're like, oh, everything changes now. Great.
Right.
And you know,
I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. We're just gonna.
I thought just came out. Okay, but you know, thinking about this conversation about making careful choices and letting it go, right? So we had this conversation before about open loop, right? And there's a closed loop, right? But still in the open loop, it's you, right? It's just that it's the void of that dimension that you're trying to investigate, right? But how about if using your grammar, everybody here will do the open loop, and we will get, using your grammar, we will get different compositions, right?
Right.
You know, and in a way, we'll sort of capture something unique about each of us.
No, and
your grammar.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's like if you give somebody 10 ingredients to go bake something.
Exactly.
We're going to come up with 10 different things, even though we use the same thing. So that's a lot of the idea. I guess from my seat, I want to be sure that those ingredients are as interesting and neat and work together as well as they can. So, I mean, I mentioned this the other day. So cool. You just play all white keys. You play everything in C. You can't mess up. I mean, that's at the end of the day, you can't. But there's still certain things. So when I'm listening back to this, some of these texture sounds I'm starting to create, and just the overall sounds of it, because I am curious. Like in the first one I played, the first thing you hear is actually a chord that I stacked together. Is that even possible with a thought? Can a thought create? And also, too, one thing I should note is these and I've said this, I hope. These are these samples, these individual audio files. They are only a single sound. There's no phrases. There's no rhythmic patterns. I want to be sure that I don't want to give you guys 5 piano phrases and we'll see how they all go together, because after a while, they're going to repeat themselves. If they're all individual and we're all playing it in different ways, everybody is going to do something different, and they're going to end up making different sets of chords. And so that's kind of where it's like a very highly curated set of randomness that can happen.
But that's also a question, because it will be interesting to see, if everybody were to play, open loop, how close they will be to each other.
Right.
Whether there are any commonalities that among this group, that you will get, maybe subclusters, subgroups, right? People that, there are a few arts here, right, that may have some particular process that you could see in the composition versus, some of us are more engineers, right? That we have a different one. It's just a question, right?
No, it is. And I think too, that comes down to how many, if we put, if we put 20 short sounds and 5 long sounds, after a while, all we're going to hear is those short sounds done a bunch of times. And so, that's why on my end and sort of creating the ingredients, I think that seems to make the most sense. Creating these ingredients, in the composer chair of this project for me, because I sort of feel like it's a design chair and then a composer chair. In the composer chair, how do I make it as interesting as I can? And that's why I didn't spend a whole lot of time on that. I need the ingredients so I can start to understand the architecture.
Right. And a follow-up question is, what is the optimal number of ingredients?
Right. I think, well, and again, I'm trying to stay with version 1.0 because I think version 1.1 starts to inject other ideas, but until the architecture makes sense and the blueprint's there, because what I think would be really neat at the end of the day is, let's say someone is going through this process and we could be done in a time duration. After 2 minutes, a new grammar of sound is slowly sneaking in and replaces that first one. And so that keeps us interested. If we just listen to that first grammar of sound for 5 minutes, do we stay interested in it or do we not? So from a composer,
you hit the nail on the head.
You know what I'm saying? So, but again, this is version 1.1 or 1.2 or 8.9. I'm still trying to understand 1.0 as best as I can before I get too many of the ideas going. But yeah, I think the injecting new grammars into it while the other ones disappear, then there is more of a piece. There's a longer idea, because again, that piece, Pepe, that I shared with you, and Geraldina, I will send it to you. I've been in rehearsals for like the last 48 hours and for a performance at the end of the month, and my brain has just been all over the place. But at the end of the day, the idea is sort of create something like Memory Dissolve. And if you look at Memory Dissolve, I mean, it's like, I don't even know how long it is. It's not that long, but it moves through different things. It doesn't just stay in one place. I want to be sure that as this experience is unfolding for people, that somehow it does evolve. And I think that could evolve in one of two ways. After, say, 2 minutes, every 2 minutes, a new sort of grammar is injected into it. Or what I think is more interesting is a combination of things created with the first grammar ends up signaling in the second grammar. So after you have triggered 15 short sounds and 12 long sounds in a certain way, then the other one sneaks in. This is later. I'm talking way down the line with it, but I am just seeing how it can evolve, as opposed to just being this one stagnant thing where we just hear this one thing over and over again.
I think the transitions.
It already happened to us, Pepe, in the sonification for 17 minutes of painting. The same grating sounds going up and down in that same in the same range. It is what the feedback that I got from the viewers was that it was nonsensical, but it was grating, and it became enough after minute number 2.
Right, and that's why for me in the composer chair, I have to go, how does this be something that, how does it evolve? How does it, and you can have moments that you can have grammars that would sneak in that perhaps are less desirable on a sonic level, but then those pass. And so you are constantly curious moving forward. And if your thoughts are what is triggering this, if you start to get those new grammars, does that change how you're perceiving it? If you hear this,
a closed loop, it would be.
Right, of course, yeah. It's a lot to, this is new for me, guys. Like, you've got to bear with me in my sort of
I think
it really is new.
I can see, you're actually following what we do in science, right? We go step by step,
of course,
trying to understand. And transitions are important, and probably you can have a different grammar of sound for example, to trigger or representing different emotions, for example, right? And so you have one that is more about the calm state, you might have one that is something else, right? And this could be triggered also, through some rules that you built in, or through some changes in the patterns of brain activity as well, right? So there are different ways we could do that.
And that's where my
Great.
that's where my learning is coming in play, and learning how this can work. And so cool, how can these things go together? So it's a very new concept.
Pepe, going back to one of the things you said about, well, what if this group were to do an open loop, you said, and so you would then begin to see something about us. Well, in thinking about the difference between closed loop and open loop, really all you're going to see is patterns that we have preconceived in our brain. I took music, I played guitar and piano, so some things will come out that were hidden in there, but they won't be anything about my reaction to the pixels of music, because I'm not hearing them. So really, it's about patterns that are in my brain. And somebody who has never touched the piano would have a different pattern because they're reacting differently. But that's all you would know. I think that when you're going to begin to know something about me is when Amos puts his I'll call them the pixelation of sounds, and then when I start hearing the ones that touch me, then I get to repeating those. Like he said, in a closed loop, you like that sound, you repeat it. Yeah. You're going to come back.
And I think, I don't mean to interrupt, but I do want to make sure before you move on, I want you to keep talking. But what for me is the most interesting with that is, if we start to trigger this with our thoughts and we hear something we like, are we able to continue to think in the same manner and continue to trigger that same thing? Like I was talking about the other day, where my daughter was just hitting the same note over and over again. Because if you're going to go to the keyboard, you can easily do that. But if your thoughts, you hear I like that. That's a nice sound. I like that. It'd be amazing to be able to end up having such control over it that you can create a melody that plays over and over again. So, it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and there are variations. You could provide a closed loop, but with some delay, right? Or you could provide some windows into you can close the loop at intervals, or there are many ways to sort of provide this additional input, right? That might be enough to shift your internal state, to give you that extra kick. Now I just want to comment on what you said, Ardina, on the open loop. Now the reason the open loop is interesting to me is because it provides a way to characterize the rest of the system, right? Because that would be unique to you, and I just wonder if people that have training in music, for example, they will have some rules that tend to bring some patterns more often than others, compared to some other people that have training in dance that use different way of moving in different rules. So we're talking about grammars, right? So when we learn a skill, we are developing a grammar, right? The grammar for movement, right? And be a musician, or be ballet dancer, or be a fine arts visual artist, right? So this is very generally speaking why I think the open loop might be interesting to study as scientifically, right? But it might provide some cues to Amos, right? In terms of, I think these patterns tend to recur more here or there. Anyway, some thoughts. We have 10 minutes. This has been going fast. Any comments from the audience?
I don't have a comment, but I have an interesting idea. I don't know, Amos, have you heard "Runaway" by Kanye West?
No. Well, which album is it on?
My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy.
Okay.
So
no. Runway or Runaway? Runaway.
So the thing is about that specific song is, in the beginning, Kanye starts with a very dark piano tone in the key of E major. And he starts it off by playing an eerie sound in the piano. It's one sound repeated over and over, and it's supposed to make you feel scared and isolated. So the thing is about music is it can provide a very big insight into a person's person's mind, subconscious mind. Kanye was playing that key over and over to say that he's isolated and scared. So the thing is, I find really fascinating with your idea of trying to make music for subconscious, is that if you could develop something like your subconscious plays a key in any and plays a note in any key, that's just really cool. And I think what you're doing here is so cool, because music really does give us a lot of insight into what our subconscious mind is trying to tell us.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I appreciate you sharing that, and I will listen to that tune.
I think you should definitely listen to that.
I will, but my immediate response to that tune, and I need to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
But what if, like, I say, so Kanye's playing that note, and it makes him feel that way. What if I listen to it? I'm like, oh man, I dig that. I like that. It doesn't make me feel alone at all. And that's the thing. We're going to respond. Everybody's going to respond differently to everything like that, and that's where it sort of becomes tricky, I think. And that's where it's hard to sort of pinpoint. I like what you said too, though, actually, about, well, what if one of the grammars was, because again, I've kept it to where at this point you could put everything together and it's going to work. You could play this little keyboard thing I've set up all day long, and you're not going to make anything that's too bad or gross. It would actually sort of be interesting to make one that's just all 12 notes, and just a chromatic, like from E to E, and that's it. That's the whole grammar. And then hear how that comes back to people. Like, do they find, because then they have access to every note. If your thoughts have access to every note and you hear it, are you going to eventually be able to land on one like Kanye's hitting that E over and over again? Like, are you going to respond to it in that way, or is it just going to be a random, you're all over the keyboard the whole time? I don't know. I think that's that would be a cool study, a cool test.
That's what I was finding fascinating by what you were trying to do, because if you could take it there, it would be a complete, it would be like a map of your subconscious, like what is your brain trying to tell you about your personality?
Right. And then that gets into timbre, it gets into tone. Like, I'm curious to hear the Kanye thing, because he's a genius producer. Like the way he crafts his sounds are just it's amazing. Did you see the his performance on SNL a long time ago, where he had the projections in the background of the dogs barking?
Mm-hmm.
I saw that live, and I don't think I've ever just been more frozen and just stunned and just amazed at what I had just seen. It was so that performance was amazing. And I mean, I think that performance actually started me down a little bit of this path of realizing this intensity and this power of these visuals, and then nothing, it's all gone. And so no, I'm glad you mentioned that. I will definitely check this tune out. But that does make me think, because at this point in time, this initial grammar I'm creating, I want it to be a pleasant thing. I tend to come from a land of, I want the sounds to be interesting, yet you can sort of just chill out with them at this point, because I think if you freak people out or you don't make it inviting, nobody's interested. So make it inviting first, and then evolve it. But I actually do like that idea of, if it is chromatic and they have access, technically, if you go from E to E, you have every note. What will you come up with? And I think,
Amos, I have an idea relating to what I go through in my performance, and that it is not a linear progression. There are big waves, and then moments of what I've described, moments of Zen that I have to go to when I look at what I've done.
Yeah.
Because it's all abstract. So it's not like there's a pedal missing there, so I know I'm going to go there.
Sure.
It's not. I have to see what I've done in order to react to what's coming next. So I've got to go to those uber focused moments of seeing for real what I've done, and then thinking what comes next. So what would be interesting to me, and I don't think we've done this, Pepe, is to look at my brainwaves that have been captured in those in those performances, and analyze them in a different way, so as to try to put what Amos said, that is version 8.9, which is that some set of musical pixels are good until this time, when perhaps the brain is doing something completely different or goes into a different mode, and then that's when the next set of pixels come in, and then there may be yet a third change in those 15 minutes, and another set, or perhaps the first set comes back in.
Yeah.
So as to make a musical performance, let's say, out of those 15 minutes of brainwaves, as opposed to just pixelations that are happening at random. So I'm wondering, Pepe, is that a possibility of looking at the brainwaves?
Yeah, sure. I think it would be interesting to look at that open loop. We haven't done that, you know, so to see what is the outcome just by, you know, looking at the open loop performance.
Open loop meaning that I don't hear the sound.
Exactly.
You know,
great. Shay, you have a question? You are.
Yes. Actually, a couple of questions. It actually relates to what you said about that grammar of music, right? I think when I was listening to what you composed, like both of them, they were very pleasant to the ears, right? They've actually, it just worked. But I'm just wondering, when someone is starting off, for example, if I go into a piano and if I start playing this, I would be worse than a child, right? Whatever I'm making would be much worse. But so for someone who is new, how do we come up with this grammar, right? Which makes sense. And to the other point, you said people relate to them differently, but something that all of us relate to is nature sound, right? We all hear it, we all relate to that. That's something everyone would have relationship. So I'm just wondering, when we try to, instead of using these notes, if you relate to some natural sounds, do you think that might be more generalizable, or which more people can relate to?
No, I mean, I think they could. I think you could do that. That would be, you know, I think that's a whole different kind of, I would just say, vibe of the idea. And I mean, I think you could easily do that. You could mix all kinds of things. You know, I would be really curious to hear. When I think of nature sounds, though, I do think about, like, if you hear the wind, right? You hear it from the back of the trees, and then it comes over you. And then you hear the birds. And then sometimes you hear those together. And then you hear the ocean, you hear the waves crash. There's a time duration with them. And if those are all falling on themselves at the same time, does that become too overwhelming? You know, does that, I think that's a thing I've tried to key in on, is making sure that it's not, that's where those, and that actually, if you had the nature sounds with the rests, that could work. And that's why those rests, I know we didn't really get into them, but that's why they are so important, because it moves us away from the child banging on the piano, or you banging on the piano. But I think, no, I do like the sounds of the nature. I mean, I think people could relate to that. And again, I think it's, you know, it's with anything, like when I do a show, which is very rare at this point in life, but when I do a performance, for me, the entire experience for people is important. I mentioned a while back that I do shows in places like very not typical music venues. So the minute they walk into the door through the end of the show, I need to be putting them in a certain emotional headspace, and that has to be inviting. They don't need to come in the door, and when they open the door, someone screams at them, or, you know, they're hearing something that's told they don't like that. So, you know, something like the nature grammar of sound could start the piece, and then, like, what I have right now is the grammar of sound could start to come in, and, you know, that could be, you know, sort of the intro to things like that. So, you know, that's an idea. I mean, and then I think that there's even, you know, you could have people talk, you could have, I know that it would get kind of jarbled, but you could do this with voices, with people talking. You know, you could have conversations that are grammars of sound. I mean, I really think it can be, I mean, you could have James Baldwin with talking with, you know, I mean, it could go on for, you could have whoever you'd like, Philip Glass, and everybody's talking over one another. And then all of a sudden the nature one comes in, and then the music one starts to come in. So, you know, for me, again, right now I see the grammars of sound as, they're just like tinker toys. It's the blueprint, it's the architecture right now that I'm more focused on, because at the end of the day, with the grammar of sound, we could all sit down and make our own if we want. I mean, that is, though I am excited about that, that's the part I have to keep, because I could sit down and make 100 of these in a week. Like, I could do all kinds of stuff with the sound, but at the end of the day, right now, there's no architecture for them to come out properly, because I have so much to learn. So sorry, I feel like I am rambling a bit, but I do like the idea of those nature sounds, and I think they would be inviting, which would be good.
Yeah, actually, yeah, if I can follow up on it, I completely
absolutely.
agree with you on that because you need something to get started, right? Something
Right.
that actually works to sort of expand to other things. But I completely agree. And on that note, from the implementation point of view, there is this music element, music grammar playing that sound, and there's this BCI element, right? Then we need to figure out what works best with the two of them, right?
Of course.
Because as Eric was mentioning, Touch Designer does interface with the Python and stuff. So I guess I don't know if we should if you have any thoughts on an interface that works with both because we know Python can work. So I'm just wondering, do you have any recommendations on a software which could sort of tie in together, right? Or maybe Eric, you could suggest it.
Oh, is this a question for me? It's a question for me.
Anyone
If
actually
you
like
want.
something that actually works with because we need to think out what works with the two, right? Because we can do Python, we can do MATLAB, but how do we interface this to some music software? What works best? What's the best bet we have?
I mean, I do think Akshay's point is a really super duper relevant one. I think considering what the brain signal is going to look like when it comes out as a control signal is going to be really, really important, right? And maybe also, Amos, important in how you design those elements, right? And how you design the ingredients for something like that. I mean, I think that Max is probably a really good tool because I know you can interface because what Akshay is saying here is that like the EEG signal is going to come out, I mean, as control signals from something like Python, right? Python or MATLAB.
Now, do Python and Max talk to one another?
Man, that's the thing is I don't really use Max that much, but I'm pretty sure they do. Cool. I'm pretty sure you can build, and I also know that you can actually build sound modules in Python as well.
See, my idea though is I use Logic right now just as a tool. My idea is, again, I have this, file of MP3s. We take those files of MP3s and put them somewhere, and that's what, you know what I mean? So just to be clear, I'm not trying to like tie Logic into, that's not, or tie this keyboard. I'm not trying to tie that at all. No, I'm all
just
for
do that then you could absolutely do that
Python.
in a Python script.
So I could just give you in MP3s, they could be put into the Python. Yeah, that's my thought. When I'm talking about when I'm talking about Logic and using these keyboards, that's strictly for Amos in the composer chair going, do I like how these all fall together? So no. I don't see them. I don't see Max really, or Max again was just a test. Like I'm still just in such test mode. You guys are ahead of me because you know more than I do.
Max, I think, would be a nice tool to explore in that you would have some of those composer chair tools, right? Not just the sample, and you don't only get the sample itself, right? You can control the volume of the sample, and you can add some effects, and you can use the control signals of the EEG to drive some of that stuff, you know, and give yourself.
And that's important.
That's right. I think one problem with relying entirely on Python is that the Python the loops that you're doing in processing the signals will also have to include like all the audio signals in its memory. It'd be really great if you could if we could process EEG, come up with some some command signal, and then send that to a different program, which would then take care of the music. Doing it all in Python, I think, is a problem.
Python does have a pretty okay audio library. I've used it before, like for playback and for you can do some, and I can send that over.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so you guys,
I do think that would be just playing the samples back would be totally possible.
And see, at the end of the day, that's really what we're doing. I do think, again, version 1 point later, you could do more processing where reverb is added or delay is it, but that's totally like no. That's later. Like I'm wanting to make this. Right. I'm wanting this to be the basic version of it. Sorry, I would probably need to go.
Yeah. So this has been a fascinating conversation. Amos, so I mean, we have talked about maybe meeting before or something. I mean, one thing, depending where you're available in the next 2 months, is have another session where.
No, I can. We can. I mean, I want to. That's what helps.
Yeah, so we can plan another session as you have more elaborated your grammar and the rest, and then also we can look into the technical details of whether Python will be best, and so that we can. I think that the goal would be to have a prototype, right? That you could play. We could send you a headset so that you can try, and we can also do our search here, right? So
Right.
to be ready, for a face-to-face meeting sometime before if that's convenient. So so I suggest that if you are available any Tuesday or Thursday, I'm gonna send you some dates that are free for us.
Yeah, send me some of that, because honestly, my schedule. I mean, I make my schedule, and so I will. I love this. This is where
Great.
This is
so
wonderful.
I think that would be great. This has been fascinating, and thank you all for your question. This is being recorded, so I'm gonna share this with all in case you want to revisit some of these questions, conversations, and comments. And Amos, thank you again. This has been great.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. I will see you soon. And Pepe, I'll talk with you sooner, and we'll go from there. But guys, I appreciate the knowledge. I mean, this is a huge learning experience for me. And if I'm not learning, I shouldn't be working on this stuff. So I'm glad to be here. I appreciate your time.
Thank
Okay,
you.
see you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.